It's that time again, another brand new Stephen King book, and here are my thoughts on it. Here is my spoiler-free review of You Like It Darker, the brand new collection from Stephen King. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is the place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. And it's a big day today, it's 21st of May, it's New King Day. You Like It Darker has just been published. I'm wearing my Stephen King t-shirt in honour of this special occasion, and even better, I've just had an email from Kenilworth Books, my local bookshop, to say that my copy is in and ready to collect. So I'm going to go and get that, but I thought I'd just introduce this video, tell you what we're going to do here. Yeah, check out the links in the description for all the other things I get on with, but more than that, we're here to talk You Like It Darker. So what I'm going to do, as I try to do with new releases, is give you a bit of a reading vlog, a review along the way, but it will be spoiler free, so don't worry about that. And because You Like It Darker is a short story collection, what I'm going to do at the end is rank the stories, my personal ranking from most favourite to least favourite. So what I'll do is I'll use the timestamps to cut up the different stories, and I'll talk about each story as I go along, do the ranking at the end, and while I will keep it all spoiler free, if I spot any Easter eggs, I will hold those as a little collection and then go through those right at the very, very end. But that will all be marked in the description below. So if you want to dodge the Easter eggs, you can do. But yeah, I'm very excited. New King is always exciting. New King short stories is really exciting. And particularly as this collection has 5 stories that have not previously been published before. So I'm excited to revisit the 7 that I have read before, or the 6. I haven't read Willie the Weirdo yet. So 6 that I've read before, 6 that I've not read before. New King, really, really excited. I don't know what else to say. Shall we get on with it, shall we? I think, in fact, what I need to do first is get on down to my bookshop and pick up my copy. So let's go and do that. Here we are. Time to pick up You Like It Darker. So let's take a look at this then. Here we go. The independent bookshop edition of You Like It Darker. Nice cover. 12 dazzling stories from the master of the form. And so this independent bookshop edition they have special illustrations on the front cover. I don't know yet what story that is from, but I will find out for sure once I start reading. So, very nice. There's the end papers. And I guess now it's time to just check what we got. There's our contents. 481 pages. Oh look, there's the drawing. 2 Talented Bastids. I guess that means it's time to start reading. Okay, first story down, 2 Talented Bastids, a really strong opener to this collection, You Like It Darker. This one is a story within a story, and it's narrated by a guy called Mark Carmody, and he's telling the tale of his dad and his dad's best friend. So his dad, Laird Carmody, and his best friend, Butch Laverdiere, both 2 pals from this tiny little Maine town who both made it big as an author and an artist midway through their lives in their 40s, and not just big, like world famous big. And they'd always sort of claimed that it just happened. They were 2 talented guys, but also something happened to them out in the woods in Maine in 1978. And Mark, the narrator, the author's son, never really found out what it was until after his father passed and he found an account of what had happened. So that's the story within the story. We sort of learn exactly what happened out there in the woods that ultimately sort of led to them being famous. And this story was really captivating for me. It's King writing in first person is always going to hook you in, and having a story within a story is a solid structure for him as well. I'm not going to get too much into the details because that veers on spoiler territory, but a lot of the details will come up when I do my Easter egg roundup at the end. Let's say for me there was a big parallel with another Stephen King novel, and I will come on to that more later on. But what I liked most about this one, we have this sort of, the story within a story has some supernatural elements to it, I'll put it that way. So we have this kind of supernatural tale in the middle, but surrounding it is a lot of table setting, a lot of nice writing, and a lot of really interesting sort of pondering on not just writing, but creative outlets, creative hobbies in general. And it's, you know, we've seen King often wonder why he was famous and sort of maybe even give off a bit of an imposter syndrome vibe and all of those kind of things. And I think there's some really powerful musings on all of those kind of things in this story. And I'm actually going to read a bit, just try and hold my camera steady. This is from page 22 of my edition, and it kind of is a long paragraph, but I think it captures so well, you know, as someone as I am who dabbles with creative endeavours, so I try and do a bit of writing, I do music, I've done photography in the past, and I know lots of other people who do. And I'm realistic, I'm never going to be famous for it. The people who are famous for those kind of things, it's a very small number. But I'm not going to stop doing it. And I think what I really liked from this story is a kind of like, there's like an acceptance here that the majority of people who do these kind of things don't get anywhere with it, and that's fine. But anyway, this paragraph just really stuck with me. And I can't even quite articulate exactly why, but it just really did. So I'm going to read it. So we've got, all over this country, all over the world, men and women are painting pictures, writing stories, playing instruments. Some of those wannabes go to seminars and workshops and art classes. Some hire teachers. The fruit of their labours is dutifully admired by friends and relatives who say things like, wow, really good, and then forget it. I always enjoyed my father's stories when I was a kid. They enthralled me, and I thought, wow, really good, Pop, as I'm sure people passing on Dump Road saw Uncle Butch's brash and busy murals of town life and thought, wow, really good, and then went on their way. Because someone is always painting pictures, someone is always telling stories, someone is always playing Call Me the Breeze on the guitar. Most are forgettable, some are competent, and very few are indelible. Why that should be, I don't know. And how those two countrymen made the leap from good to good enough to great, I don't know that either, but I found out. And yeah, just some stuff in there that I really like that hierarchy when it comes to creative outlets of people, you know, most are forgettable. There's the bottom of the pyramid. Some are competent. And then that leap from good to good enough to great. And like, you know, I've felt at times with some of my endeavours that maybe I'm good, bordering on good enough, but realistic, I'm never going to be great. But there was just something in this story that I really enjoyed about that sort of pondering of creative hobbies and doing things for a love of it, not doing it with a financial goal in mind. And then there's a great supernatural story in the middle of this as well. So it's kind of a weird mashup, but I've really enjoyed it. I would give it probably a sort of 4 out of 5 mark. I mean, it's difficult to mark one straight off the bat when I've still got 11 more to go. But yeah, really strong start. And I'm pretty happy with it. I tell you what, before we go on to the next one, so there are illustrations for all of these. I mean, you've already seen that the illustration is basically that. So in fact, I don't need to show you that. But going forwards, I will show you the illustrations on the title page for each story. So that's one down. On to the next one. And that next one is The Fifth Step, which I have read before. It was published in Sun magazine, but there's the illustration for it. So let's crack on. Okay, that's The Fifth Step done. 2 stories down. Enjoyed this one. Said I had read it before, but I'd kind of forgotten how this one panned out. So that was quite a nice surprise to go back to it and have this one wrap up in the way it did. So the story here is we've got a guy who goes to the same park bench in New York every day and sits and reads the paper. And one day he's there and there's another guy on his bench. And this guy is a alcoholic in recovery, and basically needs to talk to a stranger to do the 5th step from the Alcoholics Anonymous, the AA program. And that 5th step is to tell another human being the exact nature of their wrongdoings from their time drinking and all of that kind of stuff. So basically this guy needs a stranger to tell all his bad things to. And that's kind of what happens. It's only like an 8-page story. Again, I'm not going to divulge much more because of spoilers and all that, but it's a really satisfying one. It's just the perfect length, because I will admit there's a bit where you just start to think, okay, this is starting to sort of meander and sort of just cruise a little bit, and then at that exact point it brings you to the wrap up of it in a really satisfying way. So yeah, a really fun sort of palate cleanser after the sort of 60 pages of the first story. Like I say, 8-9 pages, bang, done. I would give this, it's probably still about a 4 out of 5 story, but I probably liked the first story more, so let's call this a 3.75. Yeah, I think I prefer the first one ever so slightly more. But this one is a quick in, out and done. Yeah, really fun. So, time for another story soon, I guess. On to the third one. And that third story is Willie the Weirdo, which is the one story in here that has been published before, but that I haven't read yet. It was originally published in French and then got an English publication in 2022, I think. Maybe 2023, I lose track now. But I've not read the English translation yet. So here we go. So just done with Willie the Weirdo. Another short and sweet one. Kind of fun. Some good creepy vibes. And a couple of weird characters. Fittingly for the story. It's kind of centres on a 10-year-old boy grandfather relationship. Floyd decided to come in because he's heard me talking. What do you want, Floyd? I'd call you Willie the Weirdo, couldn't I? You little weirdo. Yeah, and again, I won't say too much because of spoilers. It did remind me a lot of an old Stephen King short story. And I think for that reason, much as I enjoyed it as its sort of standalone piece in this new collection, the fact that it reminded me so much of a previous story does bring the marks down. And I don't think there's much of this one that's going to stick long in the memory. So, perfectly fine. Kind of chewing gum, though. Kind of bubble gum. Flavours gone pretty quickly. So I would give it a 2.5 out of 5. It's definitely my least favourite of the 3 I've read so far. And I can see it probably being at the bottom of my list towards the end of this. But, yeah. On to the next one. And the next one is the longest in the collection. Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. And is that a water tower? Interesting. So Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream, which I finished last night, but didn't have the energy to record my immediate thoughts about. Another one of the new stories for this collection, the longest story in the collection. And the premise of it I really liked. So Danny Coughlin is our main character. He has this bad dream of finding himself walking towards an old abandoned gas station, and behind it he discovers the body of a woman. And this dream just won't let him go. So he ultimately works out where the gas station is, and drives out there just to prove to his brain that it was all a dream, except it wasn't a dream. The body is there, and then he calls it in anonymously, and then things start going wrong for him from there on. And there's a sort of really sinister, interesting detective character who is obsessed with counting. And there's a lot there that's like really good potential. And I really like it. For me, it didn't quite deliver. It was, for the length, I think I was expecting something a bit more impactful. Like, there was a central theme around the importance of belief, whether that's believing just people in general, or perhaps being more open to things that you can't rationally explain. And I liked that as well, but I just think the execution of this one, I don't know, was just a little bit flat. I was really excited about this one based on the premise of it that was released when the details of the book came out. But yeah, so a little bit disappointed, but still enjoyed it as a story. I just don't think it was as strong as I was hoping it would be. So I'd probably put it at somewhere like 3 out of 5, maybe even dropping to a 2.75 out of 5. But yeah, like I say, for the length, I think I wanted something with a bit more of a satisfying oomph to it. But it was a crime story that didn't involve Holly Gibney and was a bit different to how he's been writing crime stories recently, which I did really like. And one other thing I particularly liked in there, so there was a black character in this story, and when King first referenced the fact that this character was black, he used capital B for black. And in the story previously to this, in Willie the Weirdo, he did the same thing, capital B for black. And that was kind of the only reference to the character's skin colour. He didn't go all in on it like he used to do. But that capital B for black is a very conscious and very aware choice, and a really positive thing for him to be doing. So I think, again, as we saw with some of the non-white characters in Holly and the much better way in which they were described and treated, he's definitely improving in terms of how he writes characters who aren't white. So for me, it was a very, very small thing, but I thought it was very noticeable, that capital B, and I applaud him for that, because I think that is a very deliberate and positive choice. So a good thing from that point of view. But anyway, we're on to day 2 of reading You Like It Darker. Lots more stories to get through. So let's see how we get on, shall we? Next up, Finn, which I've already read, of course. So Finn in the bag. Obviously not that long since I read it. I even did a review of Finn back when it came out. I'll stick that up there, and you can check that out. But yeah, I still like it. It's got that sort of weird Backman-y vibes, and I'm still convinced that the Bobby Feeney that they're looking for, Robert Feeney, is RF, Randall Flagg. I know that's potentially a spoiler, but just throwing it out there. So yeah, Finn done. I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5. Like I say, I'm not going to spend too long talking on this one because I've done a whole review of it. It's fine. Nice to see him writing a story set in Ireland. A little bit weird. And my son's come to join in. Hello, Aubrey. What do you want?
The monster.
Okay, should we go and play?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to play. And then at some point I'll read the next story. Bye. Next is On Slide In Road. So On Slide In Road, another one that has been published already and that I have read before, and I did remember from last time. And my main memory of it from reading it first time was basically don't mess with old guys, and that's still my abiding memory here. I think this is a really, really solid story. It's another pretty short one. I love the family dynamic in this. You get the 3 different generations of the same family, and I really like how King is able to get into the head of every single family member and show exactly what's eating them up inside, and also show that there is an amount of love there, but also that families are complicated and complex and all those things. I just noticed my glasses are really catching all the blue light, aren't they? Sorry about that. And yeah, another fun ending for it. Yeah, I just had a good time with this one. It's kind of like, it has a little bit of sort of old style King short storyness about it, but also has very much new style King. And you're sort of seeing a repeated theme here in that there's elderly characters in there. A lot of these stories have got elderly characters in there, and it makes sense because King is an older man himself now. So I totally get why he's writing more of them. But yeah, I enjoyed this one plenty. I would probably give it a 4 out of 5, which is pretty high rating, but you know, for the amount of pages it has for a story, which is not many, it does pack a considerable punch. And I just think it's not literary, but it veers more towards being literary. It's kind of like a slice of modern life. It's not your sort of traditional Stephen King fodder. but I really do like it. There's just something about it. When I read it the first time when it was published and reading it again now, just an enjoyable story. So yeah, 4 out of 5. On to the next one. Up next, Red Screen, which is one he released for charity a couple of years ago. And again, I have already read, but I'm looking forward to going back to again. So Red Screen, another very short one, but a really clever one. This one definitely has a feel of classic Stephen King short story to it. It is another one that I've read before, and I remembered enjoying it when it was released as that charity fundraiser. Really had a lot of fun with it again this time around. What really got me this time, so like the premise of this is that we're following a detective who is interviewing a guy who has been arrested having been caught just having murdered his wife, and he's basically saying that it wasn't his wife, it was an alien or something that had taken over her body. And he was saying that how he noticed was that his wife just became, more and more picky and naggy and stuff, which is something that any person in any relationship will inevitably become. The more you live together, it's just your barriers come down, so it's easier to react shortly with people and to find things to nitpick at. And this is set against the very start of the story with the detective being nagged a little bit by his wife. So it's really clever. It feels very real. So it worms its way into your mind and starts you thinking about people in your lives. It's like, well, why were they naggy with me last night? Are they an alien? That kind of thing. And then with this story, you get a very, very cool ending. And this is just one that it feels like classic King because it's short. It's got some nasty moments, but it gets under your skin. And is one that you will just keep thinking about. It's that perfect thing that Stephen King does where he can take something very real from your day-to-day and make it horrific, make it scary. So yeah, a really fun one. I'm sort of it feels like it's a 4.5, but I'm probably going to give it a 3.75 out of 5 just because it is so short. But I do really like it, and by the time we get to my final ranking, who knows, I may revise that to a 4.5. But yeah, a lot of fun was had. So another one down, on to the next one. So coming into land next is the Turbulence Expert, which is one that I have read because it's in the Flight or Fright anthology that Stephen King co-edited with Bev Vinson, and I should probably do a special on at some point. But time to revisit this one. So I'll fasten my seatbelts, put my table in the upright position, and make sure my windows are open. What is it? I'm trying to do flight things. Okay, let's read this one. So the Turbulence Expert, another one I had read before. It's in the Flight or Fright thing that I think I already mentioned on my previous clip. And yeah, an effective story. It's one I remembered the loose outline of, but reading it again definitely got more from it. So this one is obviously projecting Stephen King's own fears onto the page because he is not a fan of flying. And this is all about sort of pondering what might happen if things go wrong. 34,000 feet. I struggle to say that because I can't say all that way up into the sky. And the premise is that the Turbulence Expert is a guy whose job it is to go on flights and make sure that that nothing bad happens. And I like it as a concept. And the more I think about it, the scarier it becomes because, like, you start imagining, what if, on the outset you can think, flying's very safe, but then you think, what if all of the flights I've ever taken in my life have only been safe because there's been a turbulence expert on the flight with me? So yeah, from that point of view, it's got the potential to sort of get under your skin a bit. Fairly light, fairly breezy, fitting for one about flying. But yeah, I'd probably give it like a 3.5 out of 5. So yeah, time for another. Up next, it's time for walkies with Laurie. So Laurie another short one, another one I've read a couple of times before. So this was one that was published for free on King's website a few years ago, about an old man, an old widowed man, who is given a puppy by his older sister to keep him company and give him a reason to get up and get out and about and stuff. And yeah, it's just a very sweet tale of an old man and his dog, and that theme of elderly characters again coming through. But a sweet tale of this old man and his young dog and their burgeoning relationship. And then the final part of the story that suddenly becomes pretty terrifying. Yeah, it's one, I enjoyed it the first couple of times I read it. Liked going back to it here. And yeah, I think, without trying to give too much away, I think the US cover of You Like It Darker is inspired by Laurie. But yeah, it's a decent one. It's quite light again. And it feels like, I don't know, it's either the perfect length or it would be something I would like a longer version of. Haven't quite decided yet. Perfectly enjoyable as a story though. And probably another one that sits in the sort of 3.5 range. Yeah, sounds about right. We're flying through these. Time for another. Next up, Rattlesnakes, the sequel to Cujo. So, Rattlesnakes. Being a sequel to Cujo, it's the story in this that got all the hype when this collection was announced. It's the one that everyone mentions. And I'll admit I was a little worried going into it, because that kind of hype usually only ever lets you or leaves you feeling a bit let down. And with King, he doesn't do sequels that often, and I'm much more interested in new stuff from him. But I'm very pleased to say that Rattlesnakes absolutely justifies the hype. It's comfortably the best story in this collection so far, and it's just wonderful, and it's a really great way of doing a sequel to Cujo. There's no dog in it. We're catching up with Vic Trenton, the dad from the family in Cujo, and we're catching up with him now. So he's in his 70s, and he's telling us about him taking a trip to Florida to help with some grieving that he's doing. And the story on its own is really scary, really spooky, very haunting, and some scenes are utterly terrifying. But as a sequel to Cujo, it works so well because it's dealing so much with aging, with the passage of time, with thinking about what might have been, what ifs, thinking about things in life that consistently and continually can hurt you. And ultimately it's thinking about grief and about ghosts, which are kind of the same thing in a lot of ways. And yeah, I just absolutely love this story. It's kind of the second longest one here, about 75 pages. And yeah, I couldn't have ever imagined a sequel to Cujo in my head, but this works perfectly. And we get a very satisfactory conclusion or telling of the what happened next story for Vic and Donna after the events of Cujo. And then we get to see how that trauma has played through Vic's life and how it continues to grab him and haunt him and take hold of him. And yeah, I just thought it was really powerful. And the Florida setting worked brilliantly. Nods to some other stuff in there, which I will mention in the Easter eggs roundup. But yeah, just a really effective story. And like I say, absolutely worth the hype. My favourite one in the collection by a long way. And unless something brilliant comes up in the last two, it's going to be my champion of the entire collection. But I reckon I'd give it about 4.5 out of 5. And I could have gone for longer with it, to be honest. I think it works in terms of how tight it is, but I would have happily taken a longer piece. So yeah, Rattlesnakes. Really good. 2 more to go. Next up, The Dreamers. Another new one. So The Dreamers. Another new one. Kind of Lovecraftian vibes. So telling a story about this guy who got a job as a stenographer for a sort of scientist professor guy who was doing these strange experiments to do with dreams and sleep. It was okay. It was King trying to do Lovecraftian stuff. And as is often the way when King has a go at Lovecraftian stuff, it didn't really hit for me. So I imagine there are plenty of people out there who will like this one. But for me, it was all, I don't know, a little bit style over substance, I guess. There was definitely the nub of something there, but it just never really got going for me. And yeah, how it all panned out was just like, meh, it was fine, but nothing incredible to write home about. I would give it, a 2.75 out of 5, maybe even a 2.5. Definitely at the lower end of the ranking of these stories, of which I only have one left. Last but not least, The Answer Man. So I'm done with The Answer Man. I'm speaking a bit quietly because it's late at night here and everyone else is in bed. I'm done with The Answer Man, and I'm done with You Like It Darker. Really enjoyed The Answer Man. The premise was basically, we follow the story of a guy who is out driving, has a decision to make, and he stumbles across this person called the Answer Man, who will answer your questions for a set period of time and a set price. And it's kind of got one of those deal with the devil, monkey's paw, fair extension type vibes, where our main character is learning stuff and then has information to take away and use during his life. I just really liked it as a story. It's that kind of fable that King has done before, but this was really well executed. And, it just got me thinking about, like, if I were out and met the Answer Man and asked the Answer Man some questions, like, how would that information affect how I lived my life? Like, you might discover good stuff, you might discover bad stuff. And is it better to just let life happen? Or is it useful to know all of that stuff? Like, if you know stuff is going to be okay, for example, does that give you more confidence to just go and do it? But if you know bad stuff is coming, is that going to hold you back? I don't know. I wasn't expecting a short story to make me think quite so much. But yeah, really well done. Like, as I said, sort of familiar ground for King. He's done a few short stories like this. But him writing this as an older guy, I don't know, feels a bit more lived in. And interestingly, reading the afterword for this, even though this is an unpublished story, this is a really old one actually. So he puts in the afterword that he started writing this story when he was 30 and he finished it when he was 75. And it was only because his nephew was rummaging through some old stuff and found a few pages from it and sent it to King and was like, this is too good not to finish. It kind of weirdly mirrors how Carrie came to being with Tabitha fishing it out from the trash. So yeah, I like it, and a nice way to end the collection as well. Sort of a new one, but also an old one at the same time. So I'd probably give it like a 3.75, maybe even a 4 out of 5. I don't know, ask me again in the morning. So I'm now done, all 12 stories. So I am going to go to sleep soon. But when you next see me, I will go through my ranking of the stories and offer some overall final thoughts on You Like It Darker. And I'll also decide whether I'm going to do my Easter eggs that I spotted in this video or do it as a separate video. So then this one is completely spoiler free and that one can be more spoilerific, because that struck me as an idea today. So, I mean, you'll see me literally in a few seconds, but I will see you tomorrow and we will wrap this thing up. But yeah, 12 stories down and really enjoying having Stephen King short stories to read again. Nice. Okay, so I've slept on it all, having read all the stories, and I just want to wrap this up by going through my ranking of the 12 stories in here, from least favourite to most favourite, giving some overall final thoughts on the collection. And then for those of you who want to stick around, I will run through all of the Easter eggs that I spotted in each of the stories. That's potential for some spoilers, I guess. So if you want to bail at that point, you absolutely can. But don't worry, that'll be coming at the end, and I'll give you fair warning before we go out to that bit. So let's start off with my ranking of the 12 stories. I've made a note of them. This is based on the scores I was doing as I was going through. 12 stories. So here's my order for them. So in 12th place, the one I liked the least was Willie the Weirdo. Like, it was fine, but it just, as I said earlier, it just felt too much of a rehash of something he'd already done ages ago and did much better. And I don't think that, had this one not been released in French originally, I know it's been published in English since, but I feel like that gave it an air of mystery about it that sort of got it a place in this collection. And objectively, don't think it really warranted a place there. So Willie the Weirdo brings up the rear. 11th, The Dreamers. Again, this one I appreciate just didn't work for me. There's that Lovecraftian stuff again. But I'm sure there are plenty of you out there who will have this much higher up on your list. So there we go, The Dreamers for me. Should say, of course, do let me know your favourites and least favourites from You Like It Darker once you've read it in the comments. I'd love to hear. Okay, at 10 for me was Finn. Fine, kind of fun, but plenty more in here that are better than Finn. At 9, Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. As I said after I read it, this was one that was a little bit of a disappointment for me. I think I was expecting more from the buzz around it pre this book coming out, from the description, from the fact that it was the longest in the collection, and just from the setup and the initial hook of the story. I just think it could have landed in a more impactful way. So Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream is at 9 for me. At 8, The Turbulence Expert. Kind of fun, and if you think about it more and more, at least I found it gets really under your skin and can become really unnerving. But again, there are other pieces in here that are stronger than it, so Turbulence Expert at number 8. And number 7, Laurie. Love this story, think it's great. It's just a little bit slight, and again, it just seems to sit right there in the middle. I think that's a fair position for it. So top half now, at 6, The Fifth Step. So this one, up until the ending, this one would have been 11th, maybe even 12th. It was really starting to lose me. But then the final bit of this just brought me round so much. I loved it. And there it sits, bringing up the bottom of the top half, sitting right in the middle. And number 5, On Slide In Road. Short and sharp, yeah, sure. Maybe a bit too short for some people, but I liked it a lot. I liked the family dynamic, I liked the violence of it, and I just like the fact that the champion character in this is just an old guy. It's like, don't mess with the old guys. Sure. At 4, I've got Red Screen. Again, a very short one, and perhaps one you could look at it and think, I mean, he probably just tossed that off in like half an hour or something. Lol, I said tossed off. But again, this one, when I think about it, I found it to be a really effective one in terms of getting under your skin. It's got that Invasion of the Body Snatchers vibe. You can feel King's childhood growing up on 50s monster movies and alien films and all of those kind of things coming through in this one. It's a bit of an homage to that, and I just really liked it. And number 3, The Answer Man. So this one has stuck with me since reading it last night, and the fact that this story had been sitting in a trunk somewhere for decades is staggering. And yeah, just a really powerful story. I like, as I said when I reviewed it, King has done this type of thing before, but he does it really well here. And doing it as an older man, I think gives him even more power to do it and do that sort of reflecting on a life. And yeah, just really, really enjoyed it. So down to the top 2 now. And if you've been paying attention, I mean, you'll know which one is my top one. But at number 2, I've got 2 Talented Bastids. The story within the story, I think, is really cool. And there's some stuff in the Easter egg bit that I'm going to pick out that has sort of drawn me into that one even more and got me thinking about it. But most of all, I just love all of the musings on creativity, on creative projects, on creative hobbies, on how most people who do those things do them because they love doing it and they realise they're not going to get anywhere, and even the people closest to them will only ever sort of read it or listen to it or look at what they've done and go, oh yeah, that's good, and then move on. Whereas if that thing had come from a publisher, a third party, or been released under someone else's name, they may well have looked at it and gone, that's great, and gone back to it and wanted more. And I've certainly found that in terms of the creative stuff I've tried to do. Not many people I actually know in real life keep coming back to it and want more. They'll maybe just read it once and then be like, yeah, that's fine, nice, thank you, don't bother me again with it almost. So yeah, I found someone like Stephen King reflecting on that. You know, he's often expressed an insecurity about his own talent, and it's somewhat reassuring that someone like him can still feel like that, and I think he captures it brilliantly. But that's the number two Talented Bastids, which of course means that Rattlesnakes is the number one. And as soon as I was probably a third of the way through that story, I knew it was the number one. Definitely the standout one in this entire collection. As I said after I'd read it, I was nervous going into that one because sequels sometimes fall flat, but this was such a clever way of doing that sequel, and it's the scariest story in here. It's the most powerful one when thinking in terms of the wider themes around getting old, around scars that won't heal, around grief, around ghosts, around life, around love. There's so much in that story, packed so much into 75 pages. I would have gladly taken more, but also I feel like it's perfect the way it is. So comfortably the best one for me. Definitely deserved all the hype and sits proudly at the top of my ranking. As I said, I want to hear your favourites and least favourites from this collection. Let me know in the comments. Give me your top 3 and your least favourite, or give me your top 12 if you want to, but top 3 and your least favourite, love to see those. So moving on to some final thoughts around You Like It Darker in general. Unsurprisingly, I'm a fan. Unsurprisingly, Stephen King delivers another great collection of short stories. I think what's most impressive for me is that he can consistently come back to the short story form and smash it out of the park. Like Night Shift, Skeleton Crew, and to a lesser extent Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Those were all collections full of stories that were written when he was writing to stay alive, in effect. He was writing those short stories to get some money so that he could pay for his kids' medicine, or he could take the car to the garage and get it repaired. And so they could continue forging out some sort of meagre existence. And it's, he really honed his skills doing that. He learned to write what hooked people in, he learned to write things that sold, and he learned to write some short pieces that had a real punch and really got under your skin. And then, we had a bit of a gap. Got Everything's Eventual, which I love, Just After Sunset, which I really love as well, and Bazaar of Bad Dreams, which I think is excellent also. And, we're getting sort of a 7 or 8 year gap in between each of these. And he has no reason to continue writing short stories anymore. He doesn't need to be selling short stories all the time. It's clearly an art form and a writing restriction that he really enjoys and thrives in. And it's still true now. Like, particularly looking at the brand new stories for this collection. My top 3 are all brand new stories. I think that's just credit to what a master of this form he is. And I'm biased because he's my favourite author, but I would suggest that any aspiring author of any genre, if you're interested in writing short fiction, then give Stephen King's short stories a go. Sure, Night Shifts and Skeleton Crew are the ones that are going to give you the creeps, but some of the writing he pulls off in this collection is so powerful, so effective, and yeah, he really is the master of this short story. In terms of where I would rank You Like It Darker among his collections, it's like a 4 out of 5 collection overall for me. I think, I'm torn at the top of the list because the more I think about them, the more I feel like Everything's a Vegetable might be my favourite collection. But I'm very much aware that his best short story collection is Night Shift. So those two are definitely at the top. And then you've got Skeleton Crew, which is hit and miss, but the hits are so high that it really does always come near the top of the rankings of collections. And then for me, you've got Just After Sunset and Bazaar of Bad Dreams on an equal footing with each other. They're both really consistent and full of really excellent stories. You Like It Darker, I would slot right next to them. And I think I'll be able to give a true ranking of it when I've given it some space and I go back and reread them, because Just After Sunset and Bazaar of Bad Dreams I got so much more out of on the second read. But right now it's sitting up there with them, so it's kind of maybe joint third with Skeleton Crew, Bazaar of Bad Dreams and Just After Sunset in terms of my favourite collections. Or maybe even it's joint second, because really Everything's Eventual and Night Shift are pretty equal as well. Short version, I rank it very highly, although I rank all of his short story collections very highly, but I'm just hugely impressed that it's as of higher quality as it is. I mean, I always go into New King hoping for the best, but as long-term viewers to this channel know, the last few new releases have sort of been the better ones, like Billy Summers and later have been sort of, yeah, they're fine. Fairy Tale and Holly didn't do that much for me. This one I genuinely really, really like, and I'm already excited to go back and read it, and I'm really pleased to be able to talk about it here. So yeah, all his short story collections are definitely worth reading in my point of view, but it's one of the better ones for sure, and I think that's really impressive for him to be able to do 50 years into his career. Actually, one last thing before I wrap up this part of the video. You remember when I just finished The Answer Man and I read in the afterword that basically that had been sitting in a trunk for years and King's nephew found it and said, you need to finish this. I don't know about you, but that got me really excited for what else might be in those boxes of his and what other starters for short stories might just be sitting there ready for him to finish at some point in the next few years. That's exciting, isn't it? Oh yeah. So that wraps the review, the rankings. If you want to dip out at this point because you haven't finished yet, or you don't want the Easter eggs spoiled for you, then that's absolutely fine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you feel like it, but otherwise I'll see you soon. However, if you want to come with me and see what Easter eggs I found and maybe compare notes with what you found, then stick around, because we're going to do that before I let you go. Okay, you're sticking around, you want to know what Easter eggs I found. Okay, from here on in, anything that ruins something for you, you are watching of your own free will. So let's go through them. I've literally got a list. There's lots. So, Two Talented Bastids. Obviously, it's set in Castle County. We've got a character who's an author. There's a mention of Derry. The lead character's surnames are Carmody, like from The Mist. What else have we got? There's a mention of COVID, of course. We've got a mention of a Bates College, which feels like a nod to Bates High from the Carrie movie. We get a mention of Trump. We get a pie-eating champion, which is Butch, between 1960 and 1966, which is the same sort of time period that Gordy LaChance's pie-eating competition story was set. Also in this story, there's a mention of Micmac. We've got the Maine School Administrative District 19. There's a line that says, that's where somebody says, I'm going to offer you a fairy tale deal. We also get a mention of the Dark Score Lake, where the Noonan place used to be, which is from Bag of Bones. There's a book by the author in this story he had called Highway 19. We've got Laird Carmody dying at 19 minutes past 9. In his story within the story, there is one crow, which is obviously Randall Flagg, and at one point it was full dark. They talked about a universe that is mostly filled with deadlights. There's a mention of the suicide stairs in Castle Rock, which are in Gwendy's button box. There's a mention of the unincorporated township TR90. There's bicycle playing cards, which feature in it. But the big one here for me is obviously there's huge parallels with Dreamcatcher, like the alien stuff, but also the woods going quiet and before they see the aliens, and also the time of year. So the day this story all sort of kicks off and happens is the 15th of November. And Dreamcatcher, the day that adventure starts, is the 12th of November. So really, really close. And actually Dreamcatcher comes to a climax on the 15th of November, obviously in 2001. But I don't think it's a coincidence that you've got these alien stories up in the woods in Maine happening in November. That feels like Twinner territory here. Possibly even the same beings, who knows. Okay, so Easter eggs on the 5th step. We've obviously got insights from Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a line where one of the characters says the last rung on the ladder, which is obviously a Stephen King story. There's an old guy called Ralph, which we see in Insomnia. And that was everything I found on the 5th step. Willie the Weirdo. Literally paragraph 1, we get a mention of a 12-year-old girl and her breasts. Willie the Weirdo is making a clown face in his mashed potato, which feels a bit Pennywise-like. And that was everything I got on this one, aside from the fact that it is basically a rehash of Grammar from Night Shift. And that's what bugged me with this one, because Grammar is so much better than this, and it's basically the same story. Anyway, Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. There's a Route 119. There's a man in the black coat, which feels like the Man in Black. Our main character, Danny, lives at 919 Oak Drive. There's talk of Inside View magazine, which of course is that fictional tabloid that King created. There's a mention of Dennis Rader, which is the serial killer on whom BD from A Good Marriage is based. Danny's brother lives in Boulder, which of course is key to the stand. His passcode to his phone is 7813, which all adds up to 19. He gets woken up at 2:19 a.m. He has an uncle called Red, and there's Red in Shawshank Redemption. And the cop character who's obsessed with numbers says that 19 is the only good prime number. I mean, of course it is. So in Finn's story takes place in his 19th year. The bad guys are after a guy called Bobby Feeney. Bobby is short for Robert Feeney, RF, Randall Flagg. We've got a mention of somebody called Stephen with a PH being misspelt with a V, which feels like a bit of a wink and a nod because of Stephen King. Finn lives at 19 Rowan Tree Road. We get him being blasted with Anthrax and AC/DC, who are two of Stephen King's favourite bands. And Anthrax, of course, have written lots of songs based on Stephen King stories. We get talk of the fetal cannibalism twins, which is like in the Dark Half as well. So those are everything from Finn. On Sliding Road, there's a mention of Derry again. There's baseball chat. There's something called the Tet Offensive, which I think is a real thing from Vietnam, but like Tet Corporation, Dark Towery type stuff. Not an Easter egg, but there was a line where he said Frankie Wanky, which is hilarious for me and every other British person. And of course there's a mention of getting life in the shank, which is Shawshank. So Red Screen, I didn't actually notice any Easter eggs in Red Screen. So let me know if you did. The Turbulence Expert. There's this guy, the guy who organises where the Turbulence Expert needs to go. When he phones, he's got a lisp, and there's a few instances in King's works where a sort of sinister character has a lisp. Of course, the flight we follow is Allied Airlines Flight 19, and it's Boston to Sarasota, which is like King's route from winter for when he's taking his winters down in Florida. There's a mention of precogs, and that's a key part of lots of King's work, including Firestarter and other things. We later got the Jetaway Flight 694. 694 adds up to 19 as well. And it's tapping into King's own fears of flying. Laurie. Couple here. The main character is an old guy who gets insomnia, like in Insomnia. And there's a mention of Rattlesnake Key, which is where Rattlesnakes is set. So he's doing Easter eggs for stories you haven't even got to yet. Rattlesnakes then. We've got an old guy as a character, as a lead, becoming a bit of the theme. We've got Greg Ackerman from Vic's old agency. We've got Vic Trenton himself, of course. And Ackerman, there's Ackerman's Field from N. What else have we got here? Now, we have a mention of Duma Key and how it's now underwater. But not only that, at the end of the story, it sets up the fact that the locals are trying to basically dick around with the water so that Duma Key can be revealed again. And I'm wondering whether that sets us up for a sequel of Duma Key. I would be down for that. We've got 1567 Rattlesnake Road, which is where Vic is staying, and of course 1567 adds up to 19. We've got one character saying maybe see, maybe no, which is a very classic King phrase. We've got mention of it being almost full dark. We get Lloyd and Laurie, from Laurie, attending the funeral of Ali Bell, which I thought was a nice touch. And then, as I mentioned, we get that Do McKee sequel set up as well. Last couple then, so the Dreamers, we get a mention of Castle Rock again, and Darkscore Lake, and Route 119, and the whole thing just has a bit revival vibes, really, doesn't it? And then lastly, the Answer Man, we get a mention of Tempus Fuggeting, which is something that pops up in a couple of King's books, and there is a character called Toomey, which of course is a character in the Langoliers. And that, friends, that's a list of all the Easter eggs I found. If I didn't spot any, if you found some different ones, if you disagree, let me know in the comments. And if you've come this far, then thank you the most. You are clearly the most invested and the best viewers out there. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed You Like It Darker as much as I did. Do stick around, come back for more. We'll be back on the trailers and movies and adaptations next. But there we go, we did it. Another new King book in the works, in the bag, done. Let me know what you think of it. And hey, I might just go and read it again.